Good afternoon to our viewers in Germany and good morning to our viewers in the United States. Hello, I'm Steve Sokol, the president of the American Council on Germany, and I'd like to welcome you to our regular Kaffeepause. Over the weekend, there were a number of important developments around the world, including the dreadful and bloody attacks in Israel. But today, we will hone in on the results of state elections in Bavaria and Hessen with Michael Watzke. He has been the Bavarian Correspondent for Deutschlandradio since 2010. Michael, herzlich willkommen.
Herzlich willkommen, servus, as we say in Bavaria, and I'm very happy to discuss with you.
Well, I'm really happy to be able to speak with you on the day after these two important elections. The elections have been considered sort of a bit of a bellwether of the national mood and an assessment of the governing Ampelkoalition of the three parties. And so it's incredibly timely to be able to get a first readout from you of what happened in Bavaria, what happened in Hessen, and what this means. Particularly since the three parties that make up the country's governing coalition suffered significant losses. The CSU in Bavaria and the CDU in Hessen won clear victories, but the support for the far-right Alternative for Germany, or AfD, really surged. And I'm sure that we'll get into each of these elements during our conversation. In the Kaffeepause, I generally like to start by asking about the political mood in Germany. And so I thought maybe I could ask you about the mood in Bavaria and perhaps in Germany as a whole after the morning after the two state elections.
Yeah, I have to say that Bavaria is a very well, let's say untypical German state. Actually, for a lot of, I guess, people from America, Bavaria is kind of quintessential Germany. From a Bavarian perspective, I would say it is not, because in Bavaria, a lot of things are different. Bavaria is much more conservative, as we saw yesterday in this election, much more conservative as the rest of Germany. Bavaria is economically still stronger. There's less problems in Bavaria, fiscally, economically, than in other parts of Germany. But yeah, it might serve as a bellwether, as you said, and that definitely sees Germany steer clearly to the right, and in parts to the far right. I wouldn't say it's like super alarming in Bavaria. I think we're talking about different things next year in the state elections in the eastern parts of Germany, Thuringia, Saxony. We'll have a different picture there, because it might be that the far right AfD in Germany will be the strongest party there. We don't have that situation in Bavaria. We still have a very strong CSU, as you mentioned, with 37%. That's some call it the state party in Germany. It's pretty conservative. We have another party called the Freie Wähler, which is kind of in between the AfD on the far right and the CSU. They became pretty strong in this election. They earned some 3% to the last election. So they are at, I think, about 15% right now. So we will have a stable coalition in Bavaria, but there are signs that the whole mood in Germany, in Bavaria too, is shifting to the right. And the question is, why is that? And we might talk about this to the reasons for this shift to the right in all of Germany.
So yes, I mean, in some of the reports that I saw, there was some concern that the biggest winner of the day was arguably the AfD, which has really made huge steps forward since it was founded in 2013. I mean, over the course of the last 10 years, it's really gone from being a marginal party with sort of an anti-Euro platform to an important force that needs to be taken seriously. I mean, you know, the lineup that you started to share with us didn't go as so far as to include the AfD, which actually came third place in Bavaria and second place in Hessen. And these are huge gains for the party. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, no, it's absolutely right. And the thing that a lot of people, I guess, and I would include me, didn't see coming is that they were so strong in two southern western states. So Hessen and Bavaria are it's like the old Germany, the old southern Germany, where you had strong parties with the CDU and the CSU, but the AfD, for example, in Germany, in Bavaria, was always considered to be a party that is not so much rooted in here in Bavaria. And now it's almost at 15%, and that's a different story. And yeah, and they have become part of this country, and in some parts of the country they are even stronger, especially in the eastern parts of Bavaria. So yeah, that's a force to be reckoned with, and a lot of questions arise from that.
Mm-hmm. So let's actually come back to the question that you posed a little bit earlier of what accounts for the shift to the right, and I think some of the soul searching that we're seeing in the mainstream parties in just a moment. Let's maybe talk a little bit more about the election in Bavaria, right? I mean, Markus Söder, the minister president, was able to win. His party, the CSU, only lost 0.2% since 2018. So I mean, he managed to sort of stay stable, if you will. But he has two sort of parties on his heels, the Freie Wähler, the Free Voters, and Hubert Aiwanger being one of those parties that he's really having to fight against, and of course the AfD. The Freie Wähler seem to have done a little bit better, despite a real controversy around Aiwanger. Can you talk a little bit about the Freie Wähler and how they're perceived in Bavaria?
Well, yeah, let's talk about this affair that happened about 5 weeks ago, 5 weeks from the election day. The renowned newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung, one of the biggest national newspapers based in Munich, had a story on a leaflet that was found 36 years ago in the school. Well, what's the word? The Ranzen.
In his school bag. Yeah,
in his school bag. Yes,
yeah.
That's the word. Sorry, my English sometimes is a little bit rusty. In the school bag of Mr. Aiwanger, when he was a pupil at this gymnasium at the age of 16. So that story had never been broken in the last 36 years. Now it was broken, and Aiwanger said this was not a leaflet, and this leaflet was an anti-Semitic leaflet, like a really crass with crass words, well, I don't want to recite it here, but it was really some bad stuff. Mr. Aiwanger said that it was not written by him, but by his brother. And he didn't really explain why it was in his school bag. He was punished at the time by the principal of this gymnasium, and then it was forgotten. Or let's say then it was over. It was done. And we have to say, Mr. Aiwanger has never been accused of anti-Semitic behavior or even strong right-wing behavior. There were incidences in his election, in his campaign, where he said, for example, that Germany would have to reclaim democracy again. But I mean, there's still some way to go to the AfD from Freie Wähler to AfD. So to make the long story short, this leaflet was published. There was a huge debate in Germany. Some said, well, this is 36 years ago. He was 16 when that happened. Others said, well, that's really strong stuff, and he would have had to react differently, because it took some time until he said, okay, I'm sorry for any harm that I've done. Long story short, he gained, as it seems, he gained votes from it, because the Freie Wähler actually finished stronger in this election than in the last election. And so Mr. Söder, who is in a coalition with the Freie Wähler, and he intends to be in a coalition with them again, he has a tough partner now, a partner that is not so easy to handle as it might have been in the last 5 years. And yes, so the Freie Wähler are a party that are very strong in rural communities. It's not a urban party. They are strong in especially in the eastern and southern parts of Bavaria, but all over in small villages. And he's basically advertising himself as someone who speaks the truth and who is like gesunder Menschenverstand would be the term. Which is
that he has
common sense.
Exactly, that he's the voice of common sense.
He's the voice of common sense. He's very conservative, but he tries to balance the Freie Wähler between the CSU, which is conservative, and the AfD, which is really conservative and even in parts a neo-Nazi party. And so that's where the Freie Wähler are. And it's interesting because it's not only Bavaria, but in 2 years we have a federal election, and the Freie Wähler are poised to start at the federal election. And some people say, including Hubert Aiwanger, we have a good chance to be a force all over Germany because we are an alternative to the alternative.
Mm-hmm. So this is definitely a party worth watching in Bavaria, but also at the national level.
Yes.
Michael Söder has governed with the Freie Wähler in this last election period, but based on the election results, Söder has options, right? Is it given that he will partner with the Freie Wähler again to form a coalition? Because the math makes it look like there could be a coalition between the CSU and the Greens. In other states, there are coalitions between Christian Democrats and the Greens. Is this at all a possibility, or is nobody even talking about it?
Well, mathematically, it would be a possibility. And the Greens in Bavaria, who stand at about 14%, they used to be at 17%. They would like to form a coalition. And 5 years ago, Markus Söder was kind of flirting with the Green Party, but that didn't go well with parts of his party. And so he did like a clear statement, and he did it over and over again in this election cycle. We will not have a coalition with the Greens. And I think he is, in his word stands, and he can't. He definitely can't do a coalition with the Greens. So that leaves him in a strategically poor position, because there's only one party that he can form a coalition with. He needs a partner, and that's the Freie Wähler, and that's starting right now. An hour ago, we had a press conference of the Freie Wähler, and they already have a lot of demands, and it will be hard for Mr. Söder because he shut the door on the Greens. The Social Democratic Party in Bavaria is so poor. They only have 8%. That's the party to fill you in. That's the party that is in Germany, like in the federal on the federal level, is having the Bundeskanzler Olaf Scholz. But this party in Bavaria stands at 8% roundabout, and so they are too weak to form a coalition with the CSU. So it will be the coalition that has always been in Bavaria, but with stronger Freie Wähler. And Markus Söder is already reeling with regard to the high demands of his old and new coalition partner.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, we'll have to see how that sort of jockeying to form the coalition unfolds. But it seems like it's a foregone conclusion that it will be a continuation of the coalition between the CSU and the Freie Wähler.
Yes.
You just talked about this a little bit. Obviously, the Greens lost some traction. They dropped about 3 percentage points down to 14%. The Social Democrats, who have historically not done particularly well in Bavaria anyway, are down to 8%. And the Free Democrats, the last party in the traffic light coalition at the federal level, didn't even make the 5% hurdle. So with the 3% that they won, they won't even be represented in the Landtag. It seems as if voters were really sort of punishing the traffic light coalition parties. Can you talk a little bit about that from the Bavarian perspective, and then we'll get to the national level in just a few minutes?
Well, as you said, it's a punishment. It's a clear punishment. 7% losses for all the parties in Bavaria that form the Ampel, the traffic light coalition in Berlin. I have been with a lot of those guys in the campaigns. I was actually stunned how much help they sought and got from Berlin, like the Freie Wähler, the FDP, the Liberal Party, was campaigning with the German finance minister Lindner, who is the party chief of the Liberals. The SPD, the Social Democrats, invited the Bundeskanzler 3 times. I was stunned because I thought, the way that a lot of people in Bavaria are not happy with the Ampel coalition in Berlin. Why do they seek help from Berlin? They did, and it didn't turn out well. There's one topic that's on everyone's mind. That's at least what polls say, and that's migration. It has become a stronger topic. Was not a topic 6 weeks ago, let's say, but now that the numbers of asylum seekers have risen in the last months, it has become a stronger topic. 80% in Bavaria say this was their main topic, and so the Ampel coalition parties, the Social Democrats, the Green Party, the Liberals, they were kind of punished for what a lot of voters said was not the right course with regard to migration, because the numbers are not going down, and so that hurt them, and not only in Bavaria but also in Hessen. And that's interesting, because in Hessen the main candidate for the Social Democratic Party was the Interior Minister of Germany. So she is in charge in some way for the way Germany handles migration, and she tried to reverse course. She became more conservative the nearer the election day came, but it didn't help. She lost a big defeat, and some actually now are asking for her to resign as the German Minister of the Interior. So so that was the main topic. And then there's some other topics with regard to the Ampel coalition. They are trying right now to steer Germany, for example, German house owners, to be more environmentally friendly. So Heizungen, what's the word?
Heating systems.
Heating systems in German households shall be changed from oil and gas to heating pumps. I don't know actually the English term. It's pumps. Electrical heating.
Yeah.
It's basically electrical heating. It's heating that is possible to do with renewable energy. And this course has angered a lot of people, especially house owners, especially the people in the country, in rural communities, because they see that as a huge financial burden. And so those were 2 big topics that hurt the Ampel, and that showed in Bavaria and in Hessen in the state elections.
Yeah, I mean, the debate over the new Heizungsgesetz, right, or the new heating law, has been something that has been discussed, for months at this point, and has certainly been top of mind. As an outside observer, I think it's something that probably was not adequately communicated to the electorate, and so it provided openings to make that into a very controversial topic, controversial issue. You brought up Hessen, and so I wanted to talk a little bit more about Hesse. I mean, of course. You talked about how Nancy Faeser, the federal minister of the Interior, who was really the Spitzenkandidatin, or the leading candidate for the Social Democrats in the state of Hessen, suffered a terrible loss. The Social Democrats just came in at just over 15% of the vote. And Hessen is traditionally a stronghold for the Social Democrats. So this is quite surprising. And perhaps we can talk a little bit more about the future of Nancy Faeser in just a moment. But let's give the lay of the land in terms of the rest of the parties, because the Christian Democrats did really quite well, and Boris Rheins, who's the head of the CDU in Hessen, seems quite confident. The party came in with I guess just about 35% of the vote, and so they can continue to govern. They have a couple of options, again, as far as the kind of coalition that they could lead. But similarly to the situation in Bavaria, the Greens, in addition to this SPD slipping, the Greens slipped and the Free Democrats slipped as well, although the Free Democrats did just manage to break 5%. Can you sort of talk a little bit about the dynamics at play in Hessen?
Well, I have to admit, I'm the Bavarian correspondent. I follow what happens in Hessen. I followed it yesterday on the buy side, but what I find very interesting is as you said, the candidate for the CDU, Boris Rhein, who has never been like a politician that has been famous on federal level. It was always a state politician, but he has been minister president for 2 years about now, and he has been very successful in getting to know the people, or the people getting to know him in Hessen. I saw this guy a couple of times in Bavaria because he looked for contact with Markus Söder, the Bavarian CSU candidate. And what I find interesting is that every time I saw Boris Rhein in Bavaria meeting Markus Söder, he was always the guy who would try to be a little bit more devote. Is that the word? He tried to be like the smaller one, looking up to Markus Söder, saying this is the strong guy, and we're admiring the CSU. Right now, he is almost as strong in Hessen with his CDU as the CSU is in Bavaria, and that's a big thing, because the CSU has totally different playing field in Bavaria. Bavaria is a very, very conservative state. Some people say that the potential for the CSU in Bavaria is 70%, and we can see it with now the Freie Wähler and AfD alone at 30%. And Söder has only tapped a little, like half of this reservoir with his party. Boris Rhein has, not such a big potential in Hessen, and he tapped it pretty well. Coming in at 35% or so. So that has ramifications or implications for the next German federal elections, because the CDU is still looking for a candidate to challenge the Bundeskanzler and to have maybe the next Bundeskanzler themselves. Markus Söder was for a long time supposed to be a pick. He tried it the last election, didn't get the ticket. And right now, I would say Markus Söder is not in the race anymore, even if he wanted, because he didn't really succeed in Bavaria, whereas Boris Rhein suddenly is becoming a really strong figure and in the CDU, and that's an interesting perspective when you compare Hessen and Bavaria.
Fascinating insight, and I'm really interested also to hear you say that you think that Markus Söder is not even in the race anymore. Obviously, a lot can happen between now and the fall of 2025 when the next federal elections take place. My thinking had been that if Söder had a very strong showing in the election yesterday, that might have boosted his chances. In addition to Boris Rhein, who we've been talking about, Hendrik Wüst in North Rhine-Westphalia is somebody I think is very much worth watching, who at the state level has really shown some incredible leadership. And of course, we can't forget about Friedrich Merz, who's the head of the Christian Democratic Union at the moment, who has been wanting that top job for years at this point. So obviously, over the next 2 years, it will be interesting to watch how each of these individuals sort of positions themselves to possibly be the Kanzlerkandidat of the Christian Democrats.
Yes.
In Hessen, the AfD also did very well. They jumped, I guess, just over 5 percentage points over 2018 and landed at just over 18% of the vote. And this gives them the strongest result in a West German state. And it comes back to something that you were saying earlier, that for many, the AfD has really been a phenomenon in the East, but not as much of a phenomenon in the West. Did you follow any of the reporting on sort of the popularity of the AfD in Hessen in the run-up to the election?
Well, it seemed that the AfD in Hessen would always be stronger than in Bavaria. Part of that is that in Bavaria, people have the alternative to the alternative, being the Freie Wähler. So we have two parties right of the CDU or CSU. I knew that the AfD in Hessen would come out strong. I didn't think that it would be. I think it's 18% now. Yeah. This is kind of a force. I mean, it's almost 20%. It's almost every fifth voter. So we are talking about a stable potential for the AfD right now. We had a lot of people in Germany had the hope that this would somehow go away. Yeah. It doesn't. It stays. It's pretty stable. I'm surprised that the Ukraine war is basically giving them more potential, because I thought the AfD or from the start of the Ukraine war sided with Putin, and I thought, okay, this is a big problem for them. No, it is not, because there is like a certain amount of people in Germany that and it seems to be the same people that have a problem with migration and a problem with the EU and a problem with Germany giving up power to Europe. And those people are there, and they are not only in the East. The East has always been more Russia friendly, but they are also in the West, and they don't go away. The question is, will they ever go away again? I mean, look at other countries, look at your country, look at other European countries all over the world. Those parties, those candidates are strong. Will the AfD in Germany go away? If the other parties deal with the migration topic in a way that, well, some people say that might take the appeal of the AfD away. Others say that, if you talk about migration and about their demands, then you only make them stronger. Yeah. There's no one knows the answer, but as yesterday showed, this party is strong in Germany, and it stays. So far, it is here to stay.
And certainly from some of the comments, whether it was people like Ricarda Lang, the co-chair of the Green Party, sort of real concern about how well an anti-democratic party has done in free elections. Yes, the AfD is at 18.4% in Hessen. And that puts it, as I said before, to be the second largest party in the state of Hessen, with the Social Democrats at 15%, so 3 percentage points behind them, and the Greens just behind that as well. So that is cause for concern. It seems likely that Boris Rheins will continue with the Große Koalition, or the Grand Coalition, between the CDU and the Social Democrats. But much as we were talking about the mathematical options in Bavaria, it seems as if he could also form a government with the Greens. The numbers do work for that. Do you think that there's any likelihood that there could be a shift in leadership in the state of Hessen to a black-green government, or probably not?
Well, I'm not an expert, as I said, but I know Boris Rhein because he has been in Bavaria a couple of times and I was able to talk to him. He is conservative in nature. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so successful in Hessen. He has governed, I was told, pretty well and without much chaos in Hessen with the Greens. The Greens had to restrain themselves in a lot of ways. They had to have compromises, become more conservative themselves. It worked, but I could imagine that Boris Rhein is shifting to the Social Democrats because it gives him more leeway. It would make the Social Democrats are nearer to the CDU in a lot of issues. Migration is one of it. Than the Greens. So and they are a partner that is eager to govern because they have to make up for their horrible losses. And I guess for Boris Rhein, they would be maybe the easier partner. And I'm not a good fortune teller, but I think it's possible that they form a great coalition, like black and red in Hessen.
Yeah. So sticking with the Social Democrats, I mean, the one of the big losers of yesterday was Nancy Faeser, the federal minister of the Interior, who had hoped to become minister president of Hessen, and who basically has been for months now trying to keep the options open depending on how the election goes. And it seems as if she would very much like to stay in her current role as Minister of the Interior, given that there's no option to become Minister President in Hessen. But now, there are some real questions as to her viability as Minister of the Interior, and how reliable she is for Olaf Scholz. What are you picking up sort of at the federal level? Do you think that he will keep her on, or do you think that we might see a shuffle in the cabinet?
Well, so far I have only seen that the CDU and parties of the opposition have asked for her resignation. I think a resignation of Nancy Faeser would have some bad effects for Olaf Scholz. One is would be the next minister and the next female minister that he would have to fire after he already fired the defense minister it might be a year ago or half a year, I don't exactly know. And the Minister of the Interior is a very important person, and so I don't think right now that he will. I mean, she has lost her race in Hessen, but she has always said that she would not resign if she loses there. So I don't see Olaf Scholz right now heeding to the calls, to let her resign. She has changed. She has become totally different with regard to migration. She is now embracing measures that have been not on her desk 2 months ago. For example, border controls that go much further than before. For example, a checking of asylum status at the border. For example, Rückführungen. I don't know. That's what the ICE in America does, right? So how do you call that?
Basically forced returns.
Forced returns, exactly. To do that more often with asylum seekers whose application has been turned down. So I think, to make the long story short, I think she will stay on, and he will not change this post.
So let's sort of, as we start to wrap up, come back to the federal level and some of these overarching issues that we've touched on. I mean, obviously, as you've said, migration was a factor, but I think it's clear that these election results in Bavaria and Hessen sort of show a dissatisfaction or a frustration with the governing coalition and with the federal government. And this happens, of course, at a time where people are concerned about migration, as you've talked about, but also growing economic and social insecurity. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about some of the pressures that the coalition might be under to make changes to try to position itself better? I mean, in my understanding, it seems to me as if this traffic light coalition has one more year where they can work together productively before they have a year to position themselves before the election.
Absolutely.
And there is so much infighting and so much tension within the coalition. How do they move forward from this?
It's hard, and I mean, they have been thrown into a situation that no one will what's the word, benign, will envy them.
Yeah, nobody would envy them. Exactly.
They just got into power, and then the Ukraine war started. They have done, I would say, a pretty good job with regard to energy safety. That was a big issue in Germany. Germany is a major, or was a major, user of Russian gas. Germany's economy depended on Russian gas, and that from one day to another, or let's say in a very short time, was not there anymore. So they had to make Germany fit for a winter without Russian gas. They did a good job. The weather helped too. It was not a very harsh winter. So they did that very well. I think what's hampering them right now is that Germany's economy is in a slump. We are, I think, the only major economic force in the world that is right now in a recession. In other countries it doesn't work very well, but in Germany we have, like, the economy is going down. So that's a big problem. As Clinton said, it's the economy stupid. It might be as well in 2025 in Germany, when we're still in this situation. So they would have to find ways to rejuvenate the economy, especially the industry, especially production with regard to chemicals, all those economic branches that need a lot of energy, because energy is expensive right now. They would have to do something that maybe try to lower the price of energy for industry. That's a big topic. So they have a lot on their plate. They, as you rightly say, they have only 1 year. They would have to work better together. Those partners. I mean, there has never been an Ampel coalition in the federal level. Yeah. Those are. It's hard. Those are three very different parties, and now with the Liberals losing their election in Bavaria and barely making it in Hessen, they will be even more nervous. And so, it's not getting easier. I think Olaf Scholz has to state what we in Germany call the Richtlinienkompetenz. He has to be the strong guy. He has to say, and he has the power in the German Grundgesetz to say, okay, I'm the one who is making the shots here, and the rest of the coalition has to follow. Say it a little bit salopp, but yeah, he would have to do that. And I think a lot of people in Germany want that. They saw that with Angela Merkel, and they want that from Olaf Scholz too. So far, he has been too weak in the eyes of a lot of Germans, I guess, and maybe he will change that.
I mean, there were several reports this morning that I was able to pick up on, and just to touch on your last two points. I mean, I did hear the vice chair of the FDP, Wolfgang Kubicki, say that there need to be consequences for the FDP after this election, and even called the traffic light coalition, called the Ampel into question moving forward. In other reports, very much calls for Olaf Scholz to show leadership, because there are concerns that governing this coalition could be even more difficult moving forward, particularly given sort of the uncertain times that lie ahead, and that there could be even more disruption within the coalition. So that ties in very well with what you were saying as well.
Absolutely.
As we're coming to a close here, let me come back to a question that you posed early on, which is sort of what accounts for the shift to the right. We've talked, I think, a little bit about some of those factors, particularly migration being an issue, the state of the economy being an issue and a concern for many people. But is there anything else that you'd like to add to this sort of shifting to the right that our viewers and listeners should watch in the run-up to the 3 state elections in Eastern Germany next year and the federal elections in the fall of 2025?
Well, this shift to the right, which we saw in Bavaria and in Hessen, and we might see it in other parts of Germany and all over Germany, as we see it in a lot of parts in the world, to be frankly, I think has ramifications with regard to, as you said, migration, with regard to economy, but it's also like a mindset or an atmosphere. I think it's part of it is the backlash, as some people would probably say, against what they perceive as, wokeness. I mean, there's a lot of debate about wokeness, I guess, in the US too. We have that too with regard to gendering. That's something that I guess for Americans, it's harder to understand. It's a language thing, because the German language has not only, let's say, a teacher, but it has the Lehrer and the Lehrerin. So it has the male and the female form. And normally in Germany, we only use the male form. And now a lot of people say we have to use the male and the female form when we talk. Americans don't have a problem because it's the teacher, and the teacher might be male or female, but in Germany it's Lehrer or Lehrerin. And that's a topic, that's a huge topic. It's pervasive in all parts of, because language is everywhere. And that's something that we had a huge debate, and a lot of people are tired of this. They just say, we don't care, we don't want this. We just want to say Lehrer all the time and not Lehrerin. And that's basically, I think that's important. That's an important part too. It's like a cultural thing. And there the tide turns again to further to the right, which is normal, I think, in a society. Sometimes you have like a more leftist society, and then you have a society that's maybe a little bit more to the right. But of course, in Germany, we are looking at this even more closely as in other countries, maybe. And then, of course, if you look to the far right, they are, the AfD are, as we say, anschlussfähig. They are basically going into the neo-Nazi spectre. We have a very strong figure at the AfD called Björn Höcke. And when you listen to him, I say that to this American audience, I think when you look at him and when you listen to him, I hear like the echo of the past that we in Germany thought we would already have left behind us, and it gives me goosebumps. And and I think it's interesting, or it's alarming. That's alarming that not a lot of, some Germans don't see that or don't hear that, and they are willing to give this guy their voice, because in Bavaria, I mean, Höcke is not from Bavaria, but the Bavarian AfD is really like a Höcke party, and so we would have to watch that closely, and that's something that we look at.
So perhaps tying into that, a question from one of our viewers about the AfD has to do with what has happened or what is happening with the investigation / monitoring by the Bundesverfassungsschutz of the AfD.
It is. I think they are right now. The
it is ongoing.
Is unter Beobachtung of the Verfassung,
under observation.
Under observation. The youth organization of the AfD, the junge, how are they called? Junge Alternative, the young alternatives, are under supervision, or what's the right term?
Under observation.
Observation, right? That's it. Under observation. Some state AfDs are under observation. The Bavarian AfD is not. But I mean, that's a label. I don't know what they have found so far, but it's a label that should be hurting them, that should hurt the AfD, but it doesn't. With a lot of people, it doesn't, because a lot of people are they feel themselves out of the system, and they say, okay, maybe that's even, that's a badge if you are under observation by the Bundesnachrichtendienst, then, or Verfassungsschutz, then that's an honor. I don't know. It will be staying that way, I think, because the AfD is not moving to the middle. It's more moving to the right. And
as you said earlier on, it is a force to be reckoned with, particularly when it's commanding 20% of the vote, and in surveys even more than that, and in some eastern states even more than that, right? So
what do we do? What do we do with there's 3 eastern states next year in the elections? So far in surveys, they are in polls. The AfD is in the lead. They might not have 50 or more %. So they would need, for governing, they would need a partner, and they won't have a partner because no party so far has been able or has been willing to do a coalition with them. The CDU, some people in the CDU are starting to think about it. So far, they haven't done that. But how do you govern those states? How do you govern the eastern states, and how will they, with regard to the rest of Germany, how will they evolve? That's a big question. And the only good thing is that we still have a year for those elections. But
I mean in that sense, the elections yesterday really needed to be a wake-up call for the more mainstream parties as a whole. And there has to be, I think, some tremendous concern that if one looks at the difficulty of a 3-party coalition at the federal level, to think about a 3 or even 4-party coalition at the state level, just to block one party from being able to govern, that would be a sort of artificial structure that would be very difficult to really govern, or would have a hard time governing in real terms.
A lot of people yesterday, or some people yesterday in Bavaria and in Hessen, talked about an historic perspective, or a historic Gleichnis, or Vergleich. Comparison with regard to 1993. That was when Chancellor Helmut Kohl was still in Germany in charge, and in 1993 Germany had a lot of influx from asylum seekers. Also, the numbers were much smaller than they are now, but it was supposed or perceived to be a problem for a lot of Germans. Tensions were running high. There were several burnings of houses and asylum seeker homes or camps. And at that time, both parties, the CDU and the SPD, who was the strong parties right then, would come together and change the asylum law in Germany and take steps that actually lowered the number of asylum seekers that would come to Germany significantly. And at that time, there was a new party called the Republikaner. It's the same name as the Republicans, but it's 2 different pairs of shoes. But they were like a very right-wing party, and they disappeared because a lot of people say because of this working together of the right and the left in 1993 to change the law. Would that be a way now to do that again? The CDU with Friedrich Merz as their party leader have made this suggestion to the Ampelkoalition and said, okay, let's get together and let's change the laws and find a way. Would that break the AfD as it did the Republikaner in 1993? Maybe, but no one knows.
It's a fascinating question, and I'd have to go back and look at what the sort of percentages were that the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats had. But one thing that I find myself often reminding Americans is that these 2 Volksparteien, or catch-all parties, often had together 80% of the vote. And if you look at the 2 catch-all parties today, they are lucky if they have over 50% of the vote.
But if you take the Ampelparteien and the CDU, then you are at a percentage of, let's say, 70 to 80.
Yeah.
And then again, it would be like the so-called democratic part of the country would come together, would find a solution, a compromise, in the hopes of squashing the undemocratic parties, which would be the AfD and some people, and we haven't talked about this, and it probably that goes too far, but we have another party coming in the wings from the leftist party, evolving from the leftist party, but also vying for those voters on the right or on the fringes, and with Sarah Wagenknecht, who is a controversial figure, but some say she has a lot of clout. So that's a problem. And so maybe the democratic parties or the old parties have to come together again. It's some people say that it could help. We'll see.
Well, Michael Watzke, herzlichen Dank. Many, many thanks. Thank you for sharing your insights with us, not just on the election in Bavaria, but also the election in Hessen, and the implications of that on the federal level. This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. So many, many thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much. And I apologize for word finding sometimes. It was a long night. I had 3 hours of sleep. But it was fun, and I enjoyed my time in New York when I was there in 2014. And I'm always happy to discuss with you. I would have loved to see or to hear from you, but anyway, great to have had the opportunity. Thank you, Steve.
Well, and thank you again. Take care.
Okay, have a good day. Bye-bye.